Leadership is hard, and I've got some good news and I've got some bad news for you. The bad news is that I can't make it any easier, but the good news is that we can work on it together to get better. And you want to know the secret? Who you are comes before what you do. It's form before function. So let's get to work together. I'm Preston Poore, and this is PQ.
Hey, welcome to PQ. Today I'm excited to introduce you to Matt Tresidder. He's the co-founder and CEO of Leader, a people development platform that helps leaders engage and grow their teams. Matt's passion for fostering trust, mentorship, and purpose-driven leadership has made a significant impact in shaping how millennials lead in today's rapidly evolving workplace. In today's episode, we're going to explore what it means to lead with impact, empower others, and create a thriving people-first culture. Matt, it's an honor to have you. Hey, Matt. All right. So thanks for being here. I want to just pause for a second before we get going. I read some stuff in the Wall Street Journal this morning, and I'm a big fan of the Gallup organization. They keep a pulse on the workplace, don't they, from an employee engagement, culture perspective. And I know you're big on all of those things, but there's a couple things I wanted to hit on. As reported in the Wall Street Journal this morning, the recent Gallup research shows that only 53% of U.S. employees consider themselves thriving. That means the 47% consider themselves struggling or suffering, and that highlights a critical need for leadership that prioritizes well-being in the workplace. There's another one I want to throw at you real quick. So you've got this thriving versus just surviving and struggling type thing. And then they have this thing called the Great Detachment. The Great Detachment. And so Gallup calls this trend the Great Detachment, where many employees feel stuck in their roles, disengaged, disconnected from their work. And they say it's at a 10-year high. So if you can imagine the great resignation that we went through, right, during COVID and everything, now you've got this great detachment. The difference was people were leaving their jobs during the COVID. Now people can't, because the workplace and the environment, the economy is not offering new jobs for people to quickly move to. So they're getting detached. With both of those, I know your expertise and your passion around that, and the statistics I just read to you, what comes to mind as I share those things with you?
Well, first, it's sobering, isn't it? I mean, that's the first feeling I have, is what a shame. What a huge bummer that we've got half the workforce that's just trying to get through and talk about Friday. Like, you get to work on Monday morning, and the first thing that folks are talking about is, what are you up to this weekend? Like, what a shame. You're missing out on life. So it's sobering. But it reminds me of the anecdote. Don't worry about the folks that are leaving your company or your organization. Worry about the folks that are still there and have already left in their heads. That's the thing, I think, as leaders, that should keep us up at night. The Great Detachment's real, and I truly believe that it's the engagement with that frontline leader that they work with, their supervisor, on a regular basis, that causes the highest levels of engagement or detachment. But what a shame. And I think it's a problem that has to be paid attention to, and it's something that can be solved, but it requires a heck ton of work.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's dive into that real quick, because Gallup also says that employee engagement, 70% is attributed to that manager.
Right.
That individual connection that you have. The balance of it's the workplace, toxic workplace or whatever. But tell me, what can, on both sides, because I think this relationship's symbiotic. I don't think it's just management and leadership's responsibility to lean into people and manipulate them, right, to work better. But you also have to have the employee that's willing to receptive to bring their best self to work every day as well. So what do we do?
Isn't there such an interesting dynamic there? I think there's this almost underlying subconscious objection from a lot of executives and a lot of leadership, which would say, I never had to have that when I was coming up. No one ever took responsibility for my disengagement. That was something I put on my own shoulders. And now that we're here, I think it's easy to also displace that ownership and say, that's a them problem. But if we take that stance, we're going to lose. If we take the stance, especially as Gen Zs are entering into the workforce at crazy rates, and especially as like the dynamics of all our generational leadership shifts our entire organization, I think that apathetic stance will kill us. I really do. And so it's not enough to say, that's on you, that's on your shoulders, that's something for you to fix. I think as the leader, we have to be the ones to at least open the conversation with our team and take responsibility for it. And then this maybe is just too much of a blunt opinion, maybe we've just hired the wrong people. Because if we have got folks in our team that maybe the word, Preston, is entitlement of folks that are saying, well, this is it's not, no one ever had to do that for me, so I'm not going to do it for them. Maybe you've hired the wrong people.
Yeah. A lot of this is leadership by example. And I've found, Matt, in my career that I've learned a lot of good things from good managers and good leaders and what to do. I've also learned what to do by watching bad examples.
Yes.
And so sometimes you hope that those bad examples rub off in a positive way, showing you saying, okay, next time I'm in a role like that, or I have the opportunity, I'm not going to act like that.
Yes.
Or sometimes we develop the habits, if you will, that they impart upon us. It's kind of like you stick the apple and an onion in a refrigerator close to each other. What does the apple normally end up tasting like? It tastes like the onion, right? So
yes,
it's a tough principle to understand, but certainly
I don't know about you. I think I've learned more from the bad leaders. I think because I think you run away from them.
Yeah.
One of the forcing functions for why I wanted to start this company called Leader without one of the letters, because the website was really expensive, a true story. But one of the reasons why we wanted to start this company is the very first manager I ever worked with in a corporate setting. I was working in a call center of a bank. So imagine 500 people doing cold calls every day. Not a fun environment. That was my first real corporate job. And I was trying to break all the call records. I was trying to see how fast I could take my notes while on the call so that I could start the next call as quickly as possible. And so I was doing 100 to 120 calls a day when the average call was call numbers was about 70 to 80. And we didn't do one-on-ones with our supervisors. The culture on the team was basically like, get to work, do your job, go home. We don't really care. And I was so enamored with this idea of I want to break all these records. So I got a one-on-one set up with my supervisor after I had a really strong month. And I thought I was going to get a pay rise. True story, Preston. This manager said to me, hey, you need to slow down. You're making the rest of the team look bad. So don't work as hard. That would have been in 2009. So where are we now? 25, what are we, 15 years removed from that? And I still remember it. And that story motivates me almost more than all the amazing leaders that I've stood on their shoulders that have inspired me and encouraged me and mentored me and discipled me. I mean, I still remember them saying, slow down, work less.
Amazing. That's, I've heard the same message. I remember working at Hershey, and I went into a group called Sales Development. It was a bunch of young guns. And one of the first things they shared with me, Matt, is don't shine too brightly, meaning don't outperform, don't work hard kind of thing. And so when you brought into it, and I get the collaboration, you want to be a team member and things like that, but when you're told not to perform at your very best, it's a very interesting dynamic, isn't it?
So interesting. So I've got a question we can unpack, and I still don't know the answer for myself. Maybe you've got an answer for yourself. If that manager had told me 15 years ago, if they had said, speed up, go faster, do better, I think you can break even more records, where would I be today versus the inverse of me remembering the story of slow down? So if they had said shine brighter, do you think that would have had more or less of an impact than the opposite? I still don't know the answer. I think I'm motivated by the devil on my shoulder, like, telling me you're not good enough. And I'm like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I do wonder if that first manager had said to me, I think you can do more.
Yeah. The way I look at that, Matt, is this, and this is a philosophical point. I think we remember more from the criticisms that we receive than we do from the encouragement.
Yes.
We're inspired more by the encouragement, but I found that I'm driven more often by the criticism. I'll give you an example. I remember when I moved to the Coca-Cola Company, and I moved to Montgomery, Alabama, and I was responsible for the statewide marketing, which included college marketing for like the University of Alabama and Auburn and things like that. And the first time I presented my marketing plan, and this guy was named Rick. He ended up being a mentor of mine, and I've shared a couple of times on different podcast episodes about him. But it was funny. I got up there and I did a presentation. It was my first one in front of a big group of people, and I shared and then gave next steps, and it was quiet in the room. And Rick is a former Washington Redskin offensive lineman, big, intimidating guy, right? So I'd only been in front of him a couple times. I'm trying to develop a relationship, prove my way. And he just looked at me and goes, is that all you got? Right? But if he had said, hey, great job, I love that, whatever, those are all good things. We need encouragement. As a matter of fact, encouragement, the studies show that you have to have 6 types of encouragement versus 1 piece of negative feedback and criticism, right? So there's a balance right there. But that point, just as the person told you, right, as you were doing in the call center, and that impression it made, it drove me to get better. It did. And so I think there are purposes of some of the comments that come across. The other thing I'll share with you on this is that I read something recently in the Wall Street Journal about Gen Z coming up right now and feedback. And they don't like the sandwich formula, right? So you give this fluffy comment, then you give them the feedback, and then you come back and you give them you're doing a great job kind of thing.
Right.
What they want to hear is, I believe in your potential. I believe in who you become, what you're doing. You've got great things ahead of you. Here's a piece of feedback that you might consider, and have a conversation around that. And if you put them in terms of dignity for the individual and the potential that you see in them, they're more receptive of that feedback to take that on. Have you experienced that or seen that?
I have found it, and just a personal anecdote for me, I'm much more on the bulldozer versus best friend spectrum of the leadership spectrum, if you will. And I think that's because that's the way I want to be talked to. It's just give it to me straight. And I've found that if you go straight for the jugular, your eyes are glazing over. There's no, what's the saying? Like you've got to weigh in to buy in. If they're not feeling a level of deposits, if you will, before I'm making a withdrawal, and I'm going right in and going straight for that second part of the feedback that you just mentioned, it's almost like I haven't earned is it respect? What is it? I haven't earned the right. I haven't earned the right to just come in right from the jump. I love that word dignity, though. That's so powerful. I can't, if they don't know that I'm seeing them beyond whatever task or project or issue that maybe they stuffed up, if they don't know that I'm seeing the person behind that project before I'm sharing the feedback, it's almost, there's like a defensive posture. And so I've had to learn, like, okay, Matt, you've got something to say. There's probably a windy road to get there. Sit on your hands for a minute, bite your tongue, and find the right way to meander into that conversation before just going straight for it.
So good. Great advice and great approach on that. Let's shift then real quick to leader. You've got that on the back of your screen in the back of you and the logo.
Yeah.
You started a little bit into that, about how part of the beginning of that, but tell us what motivated you to build Leader. What you all do, actually, would be great to know as well for the audience. And then how does that reflect your personal leadership philosophy?
Well, our mission is to rid the world of bad managers by developing 1 million leaders. And the way that we're doing that is through training and software. And so the way that this all started for me is a very personal experience. The last company that I was a part of, I was fortunate to join a hyper-growth startup company, born out of New Zealand. It's where my strange accent comes from. So I joined them as their first, it was sales development, essentially. I was their first sales rep. I joined as employee number 5. And over the next 5 years, we grew from about 5 to 500 staff. It was bananas. And through that experience, I personally went from first sales rep to sales manager to director of sales, and then ultimately a VP of sales. I was 26, 27. I had 150 people in my team. Never led before, never been in startup before, never certainly led leaders before, which is a whole different thing. And I just thought to myself, like, this sink or swim mentality of just strap in and hold on for dear life, there's got to be a better way. And the very specific trend that I noticed, and we could pause on this, is when I had a healthy leader in my team, I saw a healthy team. And when I had an unhealthy leader, I saw an unhealthy team. And we saw this continual trend of healthy leader with healthy habits equals healthy teams. But we never equipped the leader to do that. It's just kind of like what I was saying, sink or swim. So it's kind of like throw them in, see how they do. If it doesn't work, rotate them out and bring the next guy or gal in. And it was such a ineffective way to scale. So if I could go back and do it again differently, I wish I'd had a playbook to say, this is the right way to have one-on-ones. This is the right way to give feedback. Back to that example from Wall Street Journal.
Right.
This is the right way to do a performance review. This is the right way to hire and fire and everything else in between. And I think by not equipping our managers with the fundamentals and with the basics, we're causing all sorts of dysfunction on the front lines. So that's a long story of kind of how we all got here.
No, that's good. There's a gap. The statistics show out there in the study I found, it's a little dated, but I think it's probably still true, that the age that people are named a people manager, put in charge of a team, is 30. But the average age people don't start, or they actually begin leadership training, is 40. So think about all the junk that somebody can pick up, or having to jump into the pool and sink or swim, to your point. It's hard to do, right?
Yes.
And so I love what Leader's doing in that, because you're trying to get up front early on and equip, teach, train the leader and the manager, both skills, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's a difference between the two. One's art and one's science, a little bit. That's the way at least I phrase it. But it's so important to catch people early on if you want an effective organization to reach the profit goals that you have, the revenue goals, the customer goals, everything you're talking about, right?
I've never heard it said that way. First time in leadership, average age is 30. You have 10 years of getting punched in the face and putting your foot in your mouth. It's no wonder that our exit interviews are full of people saying, I never felt cared for, I never got feedback, no one ever focused on me, no one ever helped develop me and coached me. That's the reason I'm leaving. You know, we've all heard the saying, people don't leave companies, organizations, they leave managers. But no manager wakes up every day thinking, how do I get my team to hate me today? So that's the gap. There's a gap between, we have well-intentioned, what's the saying? The smallest deed is better than the greatest intention. We've got well-intentioned leaders, managers, if you will, that are trying to do their best, but they don't know how to do it. And they've got 10 years of sink or swim before they've figured it out, whatever that means.
Right.
Yeah, I talked to someone recently who said, it was a CEO, and he said to me, the way that I view it is it's going to take you at least 3 years to earn your spurs as a leader. And so it's literally a 3-year waiting period. And he gets a lot of opposition from that, from young folks joining the company, of the microwave sort of generation of 3 years. What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah.
I need it in 3 months or 3 days. And so I think that expectation of, no, you're going to suck for quite a long time. How encouraging is that? Welcome to the podcast. You're going to suck for probably 10 years.
I think that's a great TED Talk that I can create, right?
Yeah.
You're going to suck for 10 years.
Yeah. What an inspiration.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting though. I'm fortunate and blessed to go. I'm going to be able to address students at Samford University in January.
Nice.
2025, and they've invited me in to come in and talk to emerging leaders. And I said, what's one of the biggest thoughts that business students have, especially in the management school? And because they're being taught management, they think they're going to walk in and run the company within those 2 to 3 years, right? And one of the things they want me to convey to them is that it's not a micro, but it's more of a crock pot. And it's not a air fry where you just punch it in and boom, 4 minutes later it's all ready. It takes a time to get there. Now, there are things you can do to accelerate, right?
Sure.
Around that, by surrounding yourself with good mentors, being part of a good leadership training program, learning different things in your career. But those all things certainly will make a difference. But those the ones that are coming out of school now, nothing wrong with them. But it's just this realization, and reality will hit you in the face when you get in the workplace, that it's not going to happen as quick as you might think.
Well, it's learning by 1,000 paper cuts, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
I'll give you an example. We used to do something, we still do it today, called a quarterly T3B3. T meaning top and B meaning bottom. So every quarter we would send out an anonymous survey. It's a 360-degree survey. People have heard of this, but it's, hey, what are Matt's top 3 skills and what are my bottom 3 skills? And I will never forget this. It was about 4 years ago. I sent it out, and we kind of always skip the top things. Like, yeah, Matt's great and he's nice and he's full of energy, whatever. No one cares. The bottom stuff, like, tell me what I need to do better. The one that punched me in the gut said, you need to learn how to be a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. That was like the opening line. So that was, that's super intriguing. And they said, you don't like to process with anyone. You just want to make decisions. And if you don't allow people to process, they're not going to share with you and they'll shut down. Mm-hmm. And I also heard that feedback third party. I heard someone came into my office once and I could tell they were having a bad day. And I asked, hey, how are you doing? And they shut down immediately. And I was like, oh, you don't want to talk? And they're like, well, no, so-and-so told me not to process things with you because you just like to make decisions. So I got known as a leader that people don't even want to vent or soundboard with. And I hated that. And so you could read Radical Candor is one of the books that's genuinely changed how I do leadership. But if I hadn't had the story to back it up, and I haven't had that paper cut of someone saying that Matt doesn't want to process with people, like, you've got to get punched in the gut a couple of times before you wake up and realize, like, I should probably change. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, certainly. Yeah, I used to say I have an open door policy, but it was actually closed. People would come in, right, but then expecting some type of level of transparency. And it took a long time for me to get past all of that.
I joke with my team president, do you have an open face policy?
Very nice. Very nice. Hey, let's move. I want to talk to this idea about trust. And so question for you real quick here is, in your experience, what is the key to cultivating trust within teams, especially in today's environment? We've got these hybrid work environments, virtual work environment. How do you go about that with your organization, Matt, building trust?
2 things come to mind. The one is, I think the most powerful tool that a leader has in their tool belt is one-on-ones. If you're not sitting down and spending regular one-on-one time with your team, you're missing the point. You've got to carve out space. Gallup would even recommend on a weekly basis, but if you've got to push it due to the sheer number of direct reports you might have, go for bi-weekly. But you don't have time for one-on-ones, but you don't not have time for them either. It's the most impactful time you can spend with an employee is taking 30 or 45 minutes on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and just saying, care, development, performance is kind of the buckets that we would talk about. How can I help? How can I develop? And how are you working towards your goals? And what can I unblock you on? Like, that general framework, I think, is so important. And then the second thing I'd say about building trust is you have to display, you talked about leadership by example earlier. You have to exemplify healthy conflict. And that means within a team meeting environment, you don't take things offline. You don't do heated conversations behind closed doors. You create a peer accountability culture and you live it out on the front lines. Because anytime you're trying to have a hard conversation, if you take it behind closed doors, you create a political or a gossip culture. And so those would be the two things that I would encourage leaders with. Have one-on-ones and exemplify healthy conflict in a public forum, not offline.
How do you address some of the fodder that's out there right now? I'm reading a lot of things about managers saying that I'm spending way too much time in one-on-ones. How would you address that? That's some skepticism that's out there, right? But I think it's real.
Yeah, 1,000%. They're probably useless meetings then. I mean, you shouldn't be bored in your meetings. I love what Patrick Lencioni says. I don't know if much of your audience has listened to his stuff or read his books, but he would say, the field is where a baseball player, that's where they get their work done. A meeting is where a manager gets their work done. So you can't say, how do I get out of meetings? How do I do less meetings? It's about less useless meetings. So I would say they're probably unproductive. You haven't got a vision for what they should be. And I think maybe a lot of leaders maybe put too much emphasis on them. My philosophy is it's not your meeting, it's their meeting. And so in some respects, they should be driving a large majority of that agenda. If you've got 6, 8, 10, 12 direct reports, there's no way you could sit down and say, okay, for the 12 meetings I've got this week, that's a third of your week. Here's all the things that I'm going to cover. Sure, there's things that maybe are different per person, but you're there to serve. It's servant leadership. And so I would say the meetings are boring or useless, or you haven't empowered or delegated authority to that frontline person to drive that conversation.
What are the 3 agenda items you just mentioned? Go through those real quick again for our audience and kind of expand just a little bit on each one of those, because I think it's important. If you have a structured and people know what they're coming in for and seeing that, then I think you're right. It would be productive and worthwhile.
Yeah, we call it the CDP, Care, Development, Performance. So care is as simple as, how you doing? No, how you really doing? No, seriously, Preston, how are you actually doing? I think often the surface level of care, we check the box, like that's certainly me. It's like, what do you mean? I asked them about how their family's doing, and we talked about sports on the weekend. That's not it. You got to go a few layers deep. So that might take 5 minutes, that might take 50 minutes if they're having a terrible day. Development is the feedback part. And so start with dignity, follow up with some hard-hitting truths, and you're not going to have feedback every one-on-one. But if it's taking to an annual performance review to give staff feedback, you're missing the point entirely. And then performance is probably where all the tactical things are going to come up. Where are we at on this project? How come we're behind on this thing? How can I help unblock it? What bottlenecks are you facing? So that's the general framework that we use internally here at Leader, then we encourage our customers to use as well.
That's great. Couple questions around trust. What makes you trustworthy?
I think the best form of trust or building trust is vulnerability-based trust. So it's starting, what's the saying? The fish rots at the head. And so the worst thing you could do as an executive is say, we don't have a trustworthy team. You need to start doing a better job of being more trustworthy or more trusting. Have you read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko?
I have not.
He's a ex-Navy SEAL commander. He's a fascinating guy. And the idea of the book is, as a leader, we should take ownership for everything that goes wrong in our team, even if it wasn't our fault. It is your fault. You're the leader. And he said he noticed this hilarious dynamic where he would have executives come to him and say, hey, can you come and consult with my company and teach my team how to take more ownership? He's like, no, you've missed the entire point. If you'd started the conversation by saying, I'm taking ownership for the lack of ownership culture within our team, he's like, now we can have a dialogue. And so vulnerability-based trust is very much that approach. It starts by saying things like, I don't know, I'm wrong, I'm sorry, can you forgive me? I screwed up, can you help me? Those are not commonly used phrases within the workplace because we're trying to posture up and pretend like we've got all our ish together. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that's certainly the best way to build a trusting environment is by leading with vulnerability. And if you're not exemplifying that from the top by being open and honest, it's not going to trickle down. It just ain't.
You're so right. And then trust is very important. It's obviously the foundation of a team and the productivity of the team and where you head and what you can do together. But what happens if trust is broken? Can you rebuild that?
Well, I think if you've inherited a team that's got broken trust, that's probably different if you were the one that caused the fracture to the broken trust in the first place. And so, again, if you were the one that was perhaps the inhibitor of a political environment, let's say, you're going to have to be the one to stand up and say, I made a mistake, I was wrong. But if you've I think if you've inherited a team, that's a different ball game. I've done that before. I've taken on I think the word toxic probably gets thrown around a little bit too much, but I inherited a team of about 30 people once that would have been described as a toxic culture. And it took 3 months to turn it around. 3 months of sitting down and asking questions and saying things like, what's the question behind the question, or what's the root cause of what's causing all of this frustration and disengagement. I've literally had someone once that's pulled me into a room with the rest of his colleagues and said, if you don't fire our manager tomorrow, we're all quitting. They like put their names on a piece of paper, and it was basically a mutiny. So yeah, fun moments like that, they're always fun in hindsight, aren't they? But I think if you're seeing the person and you're taking the time to understand and ask questions and not just ram something down their throats, I think you can turn things around. I really do.
Yeah, I think so too. And so an example that I would share with everybody is I had a manager where I was at loggerheads all the time with this individual. And the individual then was promoted out of the marketplace that we were working in together to Atlanta, and about to do a performance review. And performance review was political at the time, just not a bad, I'm sorry, it was not a good situation. And I was ready to leave the company too. New leader comes in, new manager, new leader, and we go into the office to do my year-end review. And he had it in his hand. And I thought, oh crap, here we go. I got a new manager coming in. He's read all the notes from the former one, and he said, here we go, and I'm going to get hammered. You know what he did? He took it and he ripped it in half in front of me. And he goes, Preston, this is a new beginning for you and for us. And from that moment forward, he rebuilt trust in my eyes. And it wasn't necessarily trust with him. Certainly he was trustworthy in building that through that, but it was trust in management as well. Because I was looking at management as the person that was going to hammer me all the time for my lack of performance or the way I was treating people, into somebody that was like, no, wait a minute. I see you as an individual. You've got a lot of great strengths. How can I pull those things out of you, restore this relationship, and help you move forward? And that individual became a huge mentor and an advocate in my career over the 20 plus years of the Coca-Cola company. But that's how trust was restored from my perspective, right? To have that action sitting in and said, I'm not even looking at it. I'm done. I'm throwing the trash can. Here's what I need you to do. Here's how I'm going to help you get there.
Right.
How do you feel about that? Can you do it? The same kind of questions that you had. And he played a huge role in that. And it made a big, big difference. So my advice to leaders out there today that are emerging now, listening to our conversation, be the person that looks to somebody else. Be that leader for somebody else that's in a situation like that. Tear that piece of paper or be vulnerable for them to build that trust with them. If you do that, you'll knock down barriers and help that person reach their potential, right?
I mean, there couldn't be a more perfect example of probably your viewpoint of the entire company of management. That word was, we promote people that are not culture fits. We promote people for the wrong reasons. That was your view of management or the company as a whole. And it took one person coming in and saying, actually, that was a bad egg. We actually view, the way that we view leadership is clean slate. You're allowed to screw up and you're allowed to make mistakes. And it just reframes your entire viewpoint of the CEO, the executive team, and the whole company. Like that one moment, like that gave me chills almost. What a cool story.
Yeah. Talk about being in the room at the time. Really good. I've had a chance to write about it too and share it with other people. So that's a fun story to share, certainly. So there's a key takeaway that I would share here from my perspective is that trust grows when leaders act with integrity, like that individual did, consistently aligning their actions with their words. As I watched him after he did that for the next 3 years that I worked under him and with him, and that he prioritized the team's well-being over his personal ambition. That was a big deal for me in that, and saw that. So really good. Hey, let's move into this. Now I want to have a fun conversation with you. And I have to admit, so is there a book out there from Leader that says that management is dead, something that perspective? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. If you're watching, it's over my left shoulder.
Now I have to admit, Matt, I did not read your book.
Yeah.
But as soon as I saw that, I got scratched my head and actually wrote a post and put it out. And you inspired me to put it out on LinkedIn a couple of years ago. And but I'd love to get your perspective about what you meant, because I know it's a catchy title and I think it's meant to get somebody's attention. Tell me what that's about. And then what I want to lead into is that there is this art and science between leadership and management. And management's still needed. I hope you will say that, right?
Agreed.
But the leadership piece is what we need to hopefully grow people into. That's my perspective, but I'd love to hear yours.
It is the catchy title, but I believe there's a deeper meaning that we were trying to kind of shake people up with. So I think often management is viewed as there's two ways to manage people. You've got a carrot. I'm going to pay you more. I'm going to reward you more. I'm going to give you a bonus. I'm going to give you a day off. Or we've got the stick. You're not working hard enough. I'm going to beat you more. And I think that's the classic Xerox view of management. Carrot or the stick. Our viewpoint is people want to be led and developed, not managed. And the outcome that Gallup and all the studies would tell you is that if you have a culture of leadership where you're investing into and mentoring and providing that feedback that we touched on earlier and developing your employees, the results will skyrocket compared to the former approach. So I view management, I don't want to make it too much of a dirty word, I suppose, but the key words of management, I think of like autocratic, top-down, driven leadership that's kind of got closed ears. They're not listening to the front lines. And when I view words like servant leadership, I'm thinking of things like, we're here for you. We've got have you talked about the upside down pyramid much on your show?
Oh, yeah. Well, not on the show, but I'm very familiar with it, right?
Yeah. So, you've got the CEO at the bottom of the pyramid, not at the top, and at the top are your customers and your shareholders and your staff. And so I think it's just reframing that. And I've seen the results personally in my life, and I've seen the results with our customers that we've worked for as well. When again, the priority is not how do I squeeze the juice out of the lemon and get as much out of you as possible. Simon Sinek says, people are not wet towels to be wrung out. They're people to lead and focus and to focus your attention on. And so I think that's kind of the general sentiment.
Okay, yeah, I love it. I love the premise behind it, and I'm playing with it a little bit because I saw it on the front end, and I thought, you know what? I'm an MBA. I studied management all these years. Where I didn't get was the leadership part. And what I mean by management is not the people treatment side. What I mean by are the actual science of business, where the planning, controlling, organizing, those functions. People need to know when they're in business, right? You can't just be a leader of people and not know how to run the business.
That's right. Yeah,
so
you have to know how to
make sure that we're clear on that.
Yeah, you have to know how to, have to give a good talk. Like you have to do the basics. But I think most people are not struggling with those things. Most people are struggling, especially emerging leaders. I like that word as the.
Yes. Yeah. So I have a leadership philosophy I learned at the Coca-Cola Company. It's called how is greater than what. And what I mean by that is that how you do something is greater than what you do. Case in point, how you lead people in an organization and do the management is greater than what you do. So leadership is the how, the what is the management. So, but if the what's not there, whatever you do, how you do it doesn't matter. So there's kind of a balance between the two, right?
If folks are watching, they might be able to see our logo, and it's a nod to the military. It's essentially the badge that a corporal would wear on their shoulder. It's like the lapel that would say, I'm the lowest rank of leadership in the military, but the most impactful, because it's not the general in the Pentagon that's setting culture. It's not the CEO in the corner office. It's the frontline leader. So I'll give you an example. You could have all these core values that say integrity and excellence and motivation or yada, yada, yada. But that doesn't mean squat. Like your CEO, that your pastor, if you will, could do staff meetings on a Monday, could be sending out weekly newsletters. It doesn't matter if they're treated like crap by their frontline manager Monday through Friday. And so to your exact point, if that frontline person isn't equipped to lead that person, not just manage that person, which obviously that has to happen, the core values will become completely inept. It's like that saying, even Enron had the word integrity on their wall, right?
Yeah, right.
So it really is that frontline manager that makes or breaks your entire.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick anecdote that comes to mind is that I talk a lot about values with people and have them identify their values and then also the guiding principles or ways of working, right? The behaviors that come against those. But it's interesting. And I've also been, Matt, to places like, to your point, right? Integrity was on Enron's list. But I've been in organizations where they have the values up on a chart, right, on the wall. And then I'll ask people, I say, don't look at the wall. Can you tell me the top 3 values, top 1, top 2? And people typically can't.
Right.
Do that. And one thing that we found, a couple of things that we did at the Coca-Cola Company and teams I was on, one is that we had a program called Live the Values. And so what we had the values out there, and what we'd have people do is on their teams, they would take time during their staff meetings and talk about how the 5 different values that we had came to life, right? And then it was actually fun at the end of the year, we had nominations for somebody that actually lived the values, and they gave an example by we awarded the individual. So it's kind of a neat experience. And then another team we were on is that we had both vision and values, and we monthly went around the horn and took 2 minutes to talk about how we had seen the value that was on the chart, if you will, that we listed come to life, and how we had applied it and seen it come to life in organizations. So that's how you take it off of the chart, out of the head, and write it on the heart, and people talking about it, the success stories around it. I think that makes a big, big difference in the organization versus it being just something that's out there that people can't connect with.
Huge difference. What gets recognized gets repeated. And so if you're not
Absolutely.
regularly talking about it, I love the idea of the award or like celebrating folks that exemplify it too. It's got to be part of the everyday vernacular. It can't just be something that on a scale of 1 through 5, how do I measure up in my review against your value? That ain't going to do
Yeah.
it.
No, not at all. Not at all. So really, really good. Hey, I thought you'd probably have a perspective on this. And here's the question for you. What advice do you have for millennial leaders struggling to balance purpose-driven leadership with pressures of performance metrics? So it's this leadership idea, but I still got to deliver results. There's a tension there, right?
Right.
And so sometimes you have to give direction for somebody to do something. It's not just this sweet, kind, gentle leadership type thing. But how do you balance all that?
Do you remember that scene from the first Star Wars, the original one, where they're stuck in the garbage compactor and it's closing in on them? Do you remember that scene? And Han Solo like trying to bridge it with he gets the big steel rebar. I felt that way many times in my career where you're behind in the goal. I mean, I come from a sales background. And so you're behind in your goal, you're behind in your number, and it feels like the walls are closing in. And it feels claustrophobic is probably the best word that I can use to describe it, is like the spotlight is on you. You might be feeling feelings of insecurity, and you might be using words like imposter syndrome and I don't belong here, and you feel stifled. And it's really hard to say, you know what I should do right now? I'm not going to focus on the number. I'm going to focus on purpose-driven leadership. It just feels like one is a wartime thing and one is a peacetime thing. And there's certainly seasons where you've got to scale up the DEFCON mode and say, no, we're really in wartime mode. This is a time to go, full gas, work as many hours as we can to break ourselves out of this slump. But I would say that's short-term thinking, and purpose-driven leadership ultimately will lead to a performance culture. But I want to empathize, because I've been in those shoes where, I mean, we've gone through the last 4 years of a really difficult economy. And as a CEO trying to build a SaaS company, which SaaS has been decimated in the last 3 years, it's really easy to get disparaged, discouraged, and just really down yourself by performance. And then you decide, well, I've got two options. I'm either going to double down and become, frankly, more of a jerk and have micromanagement tendencies and just focus on the number, or I need to probably take a deep breath, maybe take a 3-day weekend and come back and focus on, what if I actually infused healthy culture? Will that result in healthy results? And I believe it will, but it's really hard to balance those two things.
It is. And I think the way I look at it too, the impact of purpose-driven leadership is compounding. And so if you're doing those things early on, right, like building trust and those things, when you come to those points of decision, crisis, problem-solving issues, if you don't have those foundational things in compounding over time, if you expect them to be there right away when you have it, it's not. And so you've got to invest in those things early on, anticipating that you are going to run into a bump in the road or a challenge or the trash compactor closing in on you.
Yeah.
Because you will need people to react and help you against
And
that.
I can hear the quiet objection as we're talking about this, which is, again, I don't have time. We're not in that stage right now. It's really not that hard to just take a 5-minute moment to sit down and think, what's one piece of feedback I can give to one of my employees this week so that they know that I care about their growth and development.
That's awesome.
Do not overcomplicate it.
Do not overcomplicate it. Absolutely. Okay, really good.
Like, just do that. Like that, if you do anything this week, just tear the paper up.
That's so good. I think there's another TED Talk on that too. Just tear the damn paper up.
Yeah, that's right.
So our book. Okay, really good. Hey, let's keep moving here because I love your insights on this. Let's talk about mentorship.
Yeah.
How do you see mentorship shaping the next generation of leaders, and what practical steps can organizations take to foster mentoring relationships?
I love that word, mentor. I mean, I would not be where I am today without the folks that have chosen to pour into me. I can list off so many people. I can list one of my youth pastor, B-Rad. I can list Ross, who was like a second dad to me, where they were just people that just said the hard truths, but came from a place of what we're talking about, of like seeing the dignity in Matt first. So as a leader, I think first, don't relegate your responsibility of being a mentor. Frankly, it's your job. So for you to say like, well, no, my job is to make sure they stamp their time card and that they fill out their PTO request. Nah, that's table stakes. That's barely a passing grade. That's not even C's degrees. You're a D. That's not even good. So if you're really going to show up as a leader, you've got to recognize like you carry the mantle of mentorship. That's your responsibility. And so again, that's everything that we've been talking about today. And so I would encourage folks, or challenge them, if you will, with this. Leadership is a burden, but the burden is a privilege. And the way to treat leadership as a privilege is, how are your people going to be better this time next year based on the meetings and the conversations that you've had with them? Because if your people are the same this time next year, that's not on them, that's on you. And that's what mentorship looks like. And so it doesn't look like having intense conversations every single week. Again, I don't want to blow any of this out of proportion, but if there are small baby steps that you can make towards mentoring someone out of their weak areas, maybe they have a deep-seated fear of public speaking. Your goal is to get them to lead a team huddle for 5 minutes in 3 months. You can do that. And then 3 months later, they're going to do a 15-minute presentation to their team. And then maybe next year, they're doing an all-hands presentation, right? So that's mentorship. And there's no one on the planet that could get me to change my mind that getting someone to improve their public speaking skills isn't going to help the company win. So it's a fallacy to say, like, that's not my responsibility. They can find a mentor outside of the workplace. No, forget that. That's just a lazy objection.
Yeah, sure. And so I think...
Sorry to be spicy this morning.
Pardon me?
Sorry to be spicy this morning.
I love it. No, thank you. I love your perspective on this. And I think it's important, too, as you pour into people in that one-on-one piece. I imagine you're probably like me, because you mentioned some mentors that you have by name early in the answer that you gave. But there were people that were my mentors or became my mentors while I was reporting to them one-to-one. But when I moved into another role or another part of the organization or whatnot, those relationships remained. Right. And so I still went to those people, or they would call me to check in or whatever. I could call and ask for advice, share a problem, cry on their shoulder, or whatever that was. And those are the relationships that last a lifetime. And so it made a big difference, not only during that couple of years that I reported directly to them, but then in the following years down my career. Did you experience the same thing?
100%. 100%. And it changed the dynamic of the team, which changed the results. I mean, that's what it all comes back to. I had the opportunity once to talk to the chief people officer at Southwest Airlines. And she said the way that they think about culture and mentorship is, if we develop our leaders and they develop their employees, it's going to drive revenue. And so she talked about this flywheel. It's like leadership to the employee creates happy customers, creates revenue, and so on and so forth. And I love that idea. Mentorship, you cannot separate it from the workplace. And in fact, it's probably become more and more critical if you want to solve I've already forgotten the term from Gallup. What did they say? It's not quiet quitting.
It was, I can tell you real quick, detached.
That's how you fix detachment. Mentorship. I mean, we're kind of bookending that stat, but fixing detachment, the best way to do it is mentorship.
Yeah, so true. And then it has benefits for the one that is mentoring as well, right?
Yeah. If you want to learn something, teach it, right?
Oh, yeah, certainly. And it has intrinsic value, right, to lean into somebody like that. So I think a takeaway, Matt, from this is that mentorship is a two-way street. As mentees grow under guidance of a mentor, mentors leave a legacy of impact and inspiration that echoes through the lives that they touch. And it can be not only short-term in what you're doing in your individual relationship, the direct reporting, but later on. It's the legacy piece, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Really,
and it's
really
fun.
Good. I want to ask you, this is off script a little bit. There are skeptics around employee engagement. I'm a big fan of driving culture. I think culture is the way we do things, but employee engagement is the gas in the engine, the driver of the culture. But some people are skeptics of employee engagement because they're saying the needle hasn't moved or it's gotten worse from an employee engagement perspective over the years. What would you say to that?
Well, it doesn't happen overnight, right? So I think that's a really good point for us to reiterate, which is, if you have one-on-ones for a month, it's not going to turn the culture around. If you decide to impart a mentorship culture within the leadership team, you're not going to see your eNPS score fix next quarter. It does take time, but I think it's a cop-out to say that healthy things don't grow. And I think I have a really hard time believing that if you don't invest into your people, that it's not going to be for the ultimate benefit of the team, but it might just take some time.
Yeah.
And I also want to speak to that leader that never got this given to them, and speak to that leader that no one ever did this for them coming up in leadership. That's no excuse not to pass it on to others. What's the saying? If someone asks you, what if I develop my employees and they leave? Well, the reverse of that is, what if you don't develop them and they stay? So you get to choose. If you're the executive, if you're the leader, you get to choose. Do you have a culture of development or do you not? And you're going to create a culture where people are detached. And don't take some stupid Kiwi's word for it. Take Gallup's word for it.
Well, that quote, too, though, I think is from Richard Branson and Virgin Airlines, right?
Well, there you go.
That's where that originated. So really good.
He knows
stuff on that. Really good, Matt. Okay, thank you so much for indulging me on those questions. Great insights. I want to move to the lightning round as we wrap up our conversation. You have not seen these 5 questions from the brief I sent you, so these are meant to be quick, pithy answers. I may ask you to expand, but we'll go through these quickly as we round out our conversation with folks. So here's number 1. What's the most surprising leadership lesson that you've learned in your career?
You can't suck at public speaking.
You can suck or can't suck?
Can't. Yeah,
Can't
I
suck.
thought I could. You can't. I thought I could get away with it. I thought I could be the numbers guy, but you can't suck.
You have to be able to communicate, right? And be in front of people. It's so true. I love it.
Go figure.
It's great. If you had an unlimited time and resources, what hobby would you pursue?
Jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You have a passion. Have you done it at all, or is that something you'd like to do?
I've got a 9-month-old daughter, so she was born this year in February, and
Congrats.
I said to myself, I wanted to learn some martial arts, but I'm not going to be that dad that says you've got to go and do martial arts. And so I signed up for it, and I've been getting my ass kicked for the last 6 months. Broke my finger and tore my meniscus. It's been great.
It's been painfully wonderful.
Yeah,
Very
right.
nice. Good.
Yeah.
Hats off to you for doing that. It's great getting out of your comfort zone and doing it for the right reason.
Really uncomfortable.
Yeah, good for you. Hey, what's one book or movie that has had a profound impact on you and why? Book or movie?
Well, my favorite movie of all time is probably The Sting with Robert Redford and Paul Newman. I love that era of time, and I think the con that they played is really fun. But I think the book that's had the biggest impact on me is a book called The Power of One by Bryce Courtney. I read almost exclusively fiction. I read a lot of business books as well, but I read almost exclusively fiction. And this book is about a kid growing up in South Africa and everything that he faced. And it just taught me about grit and perseverance and resilience. Yeah.
Good. Okay. If you could travel back in time, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Suck it up.
I love it. That's good. And then lastly, what's a fun fact about you that most people don't know, Matt?
I have a scuba license. I haven't dived in a couple of years, but I'm a licensed PADI instructor.
Really? That's awesome. So
Yeah.
where is your favorite place to dive, to go scuba diving?
There's in the North Island of New Zealand, there's a spot called Goat Island, which is a fish reserve. So you can't go fishing there. And so when you dive, you are literally swarmed by fish everywhere. And
Really?
they've sunk a treasure ship, a treasure ship, quote unquote. And so you can go diving there, and it's a blast. It's the ocean's super clear. You can see for 30 feet in front of you. It's wild.
How fun. That's awesome. That's great. Hey, Matt, you've been a wonderful guest today. Thank you for your perspective. I love the things you talked about. You've got in your head a vision, a mission. You can clearly articulate not only what you're doing in your organization, but how others can benefit as well. These leadership principles aren't just principles, but they've been applied certainly because you can talk to them about these stories that you've experienced and how you started. And I think our listeners are going to gain a whole bunch from what you shared today. So thank you for being on today.
Thanks. It was really, really an honor. It was fun to be here.
Hey, thank you, Matt, for sharing your inspiring journey and practical wisdom. Hey, if this episode resonated with you at all, don't forget to subscribe to PCubed and share it with a friend. To learn more about Matt's work, visit www.matttreseder.com or check out the show notes for additional resources. And as always, follow me, Preston Poore, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram for more updates and inspiration. Thanks for tuning in. Take care and talk soon.